the standard approach. I feel like he's like the player in the tournament most likely to put a special attack on a Pokemon that probably shouldn't know special attacks, which he has done once here. I think a lot of fun. And then, yeah, I think Chuppa set's really interesting too, right? Where we've seen one Dondozo team repeatedly from different players on the stream. This is very different, notably missing Sylveon, which is very core to what we normally see. So should be fun to watch how this plays out.
And adding Pawmot as well. That's something that we do have to call out. The leads have taken the field though, and that Pawmot already thrown out into the lead alongside the Golden Go for Chuppa Cross. There's going to be the Tauros and King Gambit combination for Angels, so no sighting of the Dondozo from Chuppa just yet. That said, I think we're going to have to analyze it a little bit later, as the trainers are locking in real quick, but there is certainly something to be said about how it is going to be, how hard it is to play that Dondozo. So there's the moves locked in quickly from Angel. I think this is trying to have that explosive turn one with two very offensive Pokemon. Kind of balls of stats on Angel's side, right? It's like, do you have enough to knock me out? Because I probably have enough to knock you out in return.
Yeah, and worth keeping in mind here too, Pawmot, one of the few electric type Pokemon who does not like that Intimidate.
That is certainly a big problem, and a fighting type as well, which would be very helpful here. But the first sighting of one portion of the combination is the Dondozo taking to the field for Chuppa in exchange for that Golden Go. So it didn't feel like it was in a great position. And facing down the King Gambit, I think it's fair to say that wasn't where you wanted it to be. But the King Gambit does terrestrialize immediately, does get faked out for its troubles as Tauros fires off a Raging Bull into the Pawmot. Now that is going to be a lot of damage as King Gambit flinches and is unable to move.
I guess so, you know, Chuppa somewhat avoiding the danger there. Does take a bunch of damage return, but at least gets to see the terrestrialization on the other side. I'm actually a little bit surprised to see Dondozo. Like, one thing to keep in mind of his team matchup, you know, again, we haven't seen a Dondozo player not bring the whole combination yet, but this is one time where Angels has so many tricks for this matchup that perhaps we'll see over the course of this game that it's really tough to win using the Dondozo Tatsugiri combination. So, and maybe those other Pokemon that Chuppa will have to lean on, such as that Pawmot. Pretty excited to see that finally. It's never been like a high usage Pokemon, but it does a really neat trick in that there's a 1 PP move that can revive any of its knocked out friends. So a little awkward when Pawmot goes down first, which could happen here with the damage that Angels put on the board. Yeah,
that is definitely a focal point. Being able to bring back one of your Pokemon just makes those numbers really tough to deal with. Pawmot is leaving the field, and it is being swapped out for the Meowscarada, so you're right. There is definitely no way to activate the Commander ability. We see all 4 of Chuppa's Pokemon. That said, it is going to be another switch, so the King Gambit left the field and the Tauros in exchange for the Amoonguss and the Mimikyu. The Dondozo will fire off the Wave Crash into the Amoonguss. Yeah, not enough damage right there to really be a concern. So just a little bit of recoil damage for Dondozo, and a nice, safe double switch. Clearly, this pairing is something that is really, really important for Angel.
Yeah, I mean, we do see the option of that Trick Room on Mimikyu there. A lot of quicker Pokemon on Chuppa's side of the field, so that could be pretty devastating. And it's the 3 Pokemon you kind of see as he has his team up here. Mimikyu, Amoonguss, and Tauros all just make things so difficult for that Dondozo combo, where you just... it's really tough to actually pick it, right? I think on the flip side, without that option available, that Meowscarada could be a really important Pokemon in this matchup. King Gambit has already changed its type to make things a little bit more difficult for Meowscarada's trademark move and Flower Trick, now gaining, I guess, maintaining a resistance, but threatening a little more offense with potentially a flying type.
Yeah, being able to fire back certainly helps out in that situation. But it
no
is...
Terra Blast on it, so yeah.
I didn't get that far in the team sheet. We're still working through this open team sheet for some of these players. There is going to be the U-turn into Amoonguss, though, activating its Berry, being able to, of course, heal up a little bit, and of course can heal up even more with the Regenerator ability. So you've got to do more than that to knock out this Everstay of the Pokemon Video Game Championships. It is going to be the switch out, so let's see what comes back in. Has to be one of Pawmot or Golden Go. There's Golden Go coming to the fore, so all 4 of its Pokemon are revealed. It's the same for both trainers. The Wave Crash will follow up, this time going into the King Gambit, so taking a little bit of recoil, but not threatening those big amounts of damage. Pollen Puff into the Golden Go. That's not the attack you want to see in that situation.
Yeah, Amoonguss going the offensive once again, and you know, not ideal. We do see the Leaf Storm on Amoonguss, which I think is a lot of fun. We've not had that show up too much on stream yet. Another one of those things that's really good against Dondozo, right? Ignores that ability where the stat drops don't matter with Amoonguss. You know, not the you know, most offensively gifted Pokemon in the game, but Leaf Storm hurts. You know, it kind of doesn't matter what you're using it.
It all adds up, right? After a couple of Leaf Storms, you're looking a lot more close to getting knocked out. If you look after the pennies, the pounds will look after themselves. But this King Gambit applying a surprising amount of pressure, I think. You know, just being able to kind of shut down that Golden Go, certainly an interesting way to get around it. Amoonguss wants to get that Regenerator ability, time to leave the field, and it's another opportunity for the Mimikyu to come in. Pokemon that we really just saw appear, then leave immediately. Actually, a Pokemon I think Angel is very familiar with and has played a number of teams with, so understanding how you have to position it to use that disguise ability is really important. Golden Go will be the Terra choice for Chuppa in this matchup, though, as he does decide to fire off the Steel version just to make sure that that Make It Rain really makes it hurt. That said, the Sucker Punch is going to go into that, and because of the drop of the Ghost type, and that is not as impactful as I think Angel was expecting. Make It Rain will connect with the King Gambit, not going to get it knocked out, will drop the special attack of Golden Go, and the Disguise will take that one for the Mimikyu, doing a lot less damage, just a little fraction of its health in exchange for that change of form compared to what we would have seen. King Gambit, though, will get followed up on with the Wave Crash, and it's a knockout for the Dondozo, so still able to put in some work, even without the Tatsugiri.
Yeah, once again, too, those cursed flying Terra types continue. King Gambit not really getting anything out of the Terastallization and losing its resistance to that Make It Rain. It's a nice switch on Angel's side where he does you mitigate that most important first Make It Rain a little bit on Mimikyu by using Disguise to block the attack, while Golden Go has that neutral special attack. Now, has it reduced a little bit, but the first knockout going to Chuppa.
That is certainly you know, a big swing for him, I think, in the momentum, as both trainers were kind of figuring the matchup out a little bit. Of course, you have to remember he has the Pawmot in the back. That is, of course, very, very low, but could get caught out. But being able to swing the numbers is certainly an interesting option that maybe we'll get to explore over the course of this game. It is going to be the Taurus facing down against the now just Steel Golden Go. So maybe the Terra type is going to come back to haunt Chuppa a little bit here. It's certainly a problem. And yeah, he's forced right into the Protect, just not wanting to deal with the close combat of the Taurus. There it is. So it's now to Mimikyu to deal with the Dondozo, or Dondozo to deal with Mimikyu in return. Let's see how these two go. It is just the play rough, getting it down to below half, and lowering the attack. That is certainly going to help out. The Earthquake, another reason for the Golden Go to protect so it doesn't take that damage from the side, will land, of course, into both the Taurus and the Mimikyu, but it's just not that much damage. Looking even worse after that play rough attack drop as well.
It technically attacked that turn. Hey, you know, sometimes, I mean, I know you mentioned all that stuff about the pennies and the pounds, but weren't too many pennies on that turn.
No, that is certainly a light-looking piggy bank as you start to cash in for those knockouts. But both trainers are still, I don't think anyone has made a clear-cut advantage. Yes, there is a knockout on Angel's side. You know, he's lost the King Gambit, but these Pokemon, particularly the Paldean and Taurus, could start to put a little bit of work. And really, you know, if you're thinking of the Golden Go, you've just protected. Where do you swap to? Pawmot is exceptionally low, would definitely get knocked out there. And the Meowscarada is a dark type. That doesn't feel like the correct choice. The Meowscarada is coming in place of the Dondozo right now. Obviously, would have the Grass type as a positive type matchup into this Taurus. And Taurus just firing off the close combat, landing it neatly onto the Golden Go, giving him that Ghost type, coming back to be quite painful. I think both trainers have gone with a defensive Terra type that actually hasn't worked as they intended.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough where these Pokemon, just seems like kind of no matter what they have on the field, there's some awkward matchup both ways. And we do see a super effective play rough, non-ideal switch there, and Meowscarada going down before it gets to do anything.
That was a tough switch to make, especially when you saw the play rough the previous turn. Chuppa thinking he probably wants to save the Dondozo for a later situation. That said, it is going to be Dondozo and Pawmot coming to the game here. Pawmot exceptionally low, Dondozo already just at half. So a lot of work for these Pokemon to do. It's 3v2, but can Pawmot swing something a little bit cheeky in there? There is, of course, options to try and shut this down. Very respectful and knowledgeable of Angel to make sure no Revival Blessing, just an easy Shadow Sneak to knock that out.
Yeah, huge impact of that priority move there, whereas it could have been a somewhat different game. Although, man, with Dondozo this low, I mean, even if Pawmot had revived another Pokemon, it would have been a big gap.
Yeah, it still would have been a big problem. The Dondozo will order up into the Taurus, and a very underwhelming attack right there, seeing what happens when you don't set it up with the Tatsugiri. It definitely becomes a whole different ball game. And Chuppa throwing in the towel at the end of game 1 there. Kept himself in the game for a very long time, but overall, you know, Angel just felt like that Taurus and the Mimikyu was kind of unstoppable at the end there.
Yeah, pretty dominant game 1. I think a little concerning on Chuppa's side, where Angel kind of has the all the Pokemon on his team that are there to stop the Dondozo Tatsugiri combination. Was able to win with that despite Chuppa going with a different approach, right? I think it's kind of like the worst of both worlds, where like he's committed for Pokemon that weren't there, and still won like very cleanly. So I think this is a really difficult game 2 adjustment for Chuppa now, where it's like, all right, well, I kind of team preview went the way that I expected and maybe wanted it to go, and it still didn't work. So there's a lot of ground to make up here. And yeah, I mean, one thing to keep in mind is, once again, we had a game where the terrestrialization wound up being kind of whatever, where, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it was counter-effective, because it did help both the Pokemon who terrestrialized stay in the game longer, but certainly, it wasn't sort of the high-impact terrestrialization that has like won games over the course of the weekend that we've seen either.
Well, it's one of those that gets you through one turn, but later it comes back to haunt you, and I think that's such a tough part of the mechanic. The players are still getting their heads around. It's like, will the payoff now be worth potentially suffering later? And what was interesting about this one is both of them had actually shown a lot of their hand in this one, with a lot of switching early doors. They knew what was coming forward for like their opponent, so kind of falling into that one, it's like, yes, Golden Go gets to do more damage with Make It Rain, hurrah! But there's a Paldean Taurus around, and that is something that you've got to think about. Going from Ghost Steel to just Ghost, I don't know, I really like the Ghost typing on Golden Go, and I know in some cases, if it pushes you to the win with the extra damage from Make It Rain, that is value. On the flip side, when you get hit by a close combat, a move you'd usually be immune to, it feels bad.
Yeah, I think something for the other side I feel too is like, I don't think Angel really is in a position where he has to get a ton of value out of his terrestrialization, right? Like, I think he has a pretty significant team matchup advantage. So, Chuppa might have to hit a home run with his terrestrialization and the way he plays the game, where Angel maybe can just hit a single and still win the game.
Yep. It's another sports reference. I have to learn these, and I do understand those. We're getting there, Scott. But it's the Taurus and Mimikyu for Angel's side of the field, and Meowscarada and Pawmot over on Chuppa's side. Definitely needs to get a little more wiggle room going early, I think it's fair to say, because this Mimikyu changes things up. I mean, these Pokemon on Chuppa's side are pacey. That's what they're known for, and being able to get caught with, I don't know, a Trick Room would feel pretty bad.
Yeah, it's a dangerous thing too, where Chuppa's like right on the edge of having a Pokemon that need to be holding Focus Sash theme team here, but you only get one. So we saw what happened last game to Meowscarada, where it kind of just got dunked when it tried to switch in, and you have Trick Room goes up. This is not a team that's going to be able to deal with that very well.
And surprisingly, Mimikyu's still a great Trick Room setter, right? It is always going to cause problems with the Disguise ability, and of course the Taurus just being on the field, I think, applies enough pressure to maybe make the decision a little bit harder for Chuppa to just like double in. Pawmot does commit to the fake out, which means there is of course going to be a kind of free hit for this Mimikyu. Will get caught by the U-turn, of course, bust the Disguise, making sure that it's not able to just take those hits freely, take a little bit of chip damage, get off the field. It did get caught by the Play Rough in the previous turn, and that is something it didn't want to see again. So leaving the field very wise, but not much damage going down. The Golden Go will take to the field here, so kind of sticking with the same Pokemon choices, but the Trick Room goes up for Mimikyu, was not able to shut that down. And looking at the team selection and kind of the speeds that Chuppa decided to go with, that could be very impactful.
Yeah. I do think it's the best turn one that Chuppa could realistically have gotten there, though. I mean, I guess like you can try and double Mimikyu and stop the Trick Room, but if you're not going to do that, it does have Golden Go out in the Trick Room now. It can't be spored. It has a type advantage against the Mimikyu. The Mimikyu's Disguise is broken. It's still not a great spot just because, this is not a good team for playing in Trick Room with when you can't use the Dondozo combo, but, it's solid. The problem is, how do you stop the Spore from coming in on the other slot?
Yeah, that is going to be a big concern, and once you save the Mimikyu really could just leave and wait for later, right? Once that Golden Go is dealt with, you're probably feeling a lot better, as that is exactly where Angel's mind is at on this one. Bring the King Gambit in. Of course, it's not the flying type right now. It's still going to resist that Make It Rain rather nicely, and that Pawmot knows it's probably going to get put to sleep, so time to switch things around. And Meowscarada, a much better choice as the Grass type, not able to just get spored. So the Amoonguss going first, falling for that one, not able to connect that one. As Golden Go realizes it's time to maybe try and set up a little bit, it's got to put in a large amount of work gets that nasty plot going. So a null turn really for Angel. Does get to see the switch though, and a little bit of breathing room kind of bought for Chuppa by setting up that nasty plot. So when it does connect with the Make It Rain, it can push for those knockouts a little bit easier.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we said Chuppa wanted to hit a home run, and like he's building up. You got the nasty plot for free. The Golden Go's not in an amazing situation here, but he did manage to avoid that Spore on the previous turn. But now we're in a weird spot where both of Angel's Pokemon are potentially threatening a bunch of damage on their side. This is one situation where Mungus' Pollen Puff is actually very threatening on the Meowscarada, enough so that Chuppa has to be really careful. The Dark type attacks onto Golden Go, pretty scary, so tough turn.
It's definitely not going to be the easiest as the Pawmot takes the field in exchange for the Meowscarada, realizing, yes, that Pollen Puff could do a huge amount of damage. This is going to be a Terra coming through pretty early on, but it's on to that Golden Go again. So being able to, go to the Steel type, drop the Ghost type, I get it, but let's see if that comes back later like it did in game number 1. The Pollen Puff will land into the Pawmot, not very effective, but a little bit of chip damage is going to start adding up. And of course, getting rid of the Ghost type, working out well defensively here as he's not able to get caught out by that Kowtow Cleave. The Make It Rain will come through doing extra damage. And after that nasty plot, that is absolutely huge. The Amoonguss just taken out and big damage down onto the King Gambit as well. So things are working out here very well for Chuppa.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen why Golden Go is so feared, right? Where we've seen so many players shift toward a more defensive Golden Go set. But yeah, I mean, both the nasty plot and an offensive item, we haven't seen too much of that. It's largely been like nasty plot and leftovers we've seen on stream. And like, there's advantages to that too. But if you can get those attacks off, Golden Go just hurts so much. And Pawmot gets in pretty free. Can threaten a fake out here to help perhaps get one more turn down. And then, Trick Room's almost been killed off. Chuppa may get out of this one. It's still close. I think this game's kind of right on the edge, but he's done a great job of killing off this Trick Room despite having so many quick Pokemon on his side. He's
been able to find a knockout in there as well, and he still has a Pokemon advantage at 4-3, so understanding this Trick Room and how to play around it is really wise. The Pawmot will fake out into the King Gambit, and then there is going to be a flinch over there. The Mimikyu is going to connect the Play Rough into the Pawmot. Of course, Fighting type, easy knockout right there. So no Revival Blessings once again, but who's going to stop this Golden Go right now? It is going to be just leaving the, the field covered in coins with one of these Make It Rains. Not enough for the knockout on the King Gambit after that special attack drop the previous turn, but easily enough for a knockout on this Mimikyu. So another trade of Pokemon, I'd say definitely feeling pretty good as the Golden Go, losing some of its HP. That's a trade that you're very willing to make. That said, there is of course going to be the arrival of the Paldean Taurus.
But just the wrong time, right? We saw Angel looking at the status of the game. There's still one more turn of Trick Room, and that Taurus is holding a Choice Scarf, which would be fantastic if this game goes one more turn and Taurus is still available to be used. Being the quickest Pokemon on the field right now, not great.
No, not the time you want for it, and that's always the flip side of trying to do these hybrid speed teams where, yes, you have your Trick Room turns, those are really cool, but when you get caught outside of that Trick Room, and if you have to kind of end the game before the Trick Room ends, yeah, it's going to look really bad for the Taurus. So that is taking to the field right now. That is going to be, would love to throw one of those close combats out in either of these slots, actually. The Intimidate's certainly going to, try and slow things down. Not going to be an impact on the Golden Go. This King Gambit is dangerously low.
Yeah, it just is a tough spot now where that the Taurus can't protect. Neither can the Meowscarada, actually, both of them holding choice items. But yeah, it's I think it's probably impossible on Angel's side not to lose a Pokemon this turn. Both of them could be potentially effective once this Trick Room expires, but Chuppa just played a very scrappy game here, right? Where it seemed at the beginning, Angel got the Trick Room up, but how do you get out of that with both Meowscarada and Pawmot as two of the Pokemon that have been revealed so far? But he's maneuvered really well. The Pawmot, even though it didn't really get to dish out any damage, was kind of like just effective enough where it protected Golden Go enough that it was able to hang out for all these turns of Trick Room, get the nasty plot off, fire off these huge Make It Rains. It's been a nice game from that side of the field.
Well, it is going to be the Terrestrialization from Angel's side, so deciding to match this one up, and very wisely, he's deciding to Terrestrialize his Paldean Taurus. It's going with the Grass type, so getting rid, it's obviously the Aqua breed, so getting rid of that massive weakness to the Meowscarada is absolutely huge. The Golden Go will protect this turn, so knowing it, could get caught by a pretty nasty Sucker Punch here, doesn't want to fall foul of that one too quickly. early. The Taurus is going to be in a position to try and cause some problems. Meowscarada going as the Dark type will get the knockout on King Gambit, so that Sucker Punch being punished, it wasn't able to connect and then started to cause some problems. Of course, it does have the Assault Vest. You are able to, not able to protect with that one, but the Dark typing will come back to haunt this Meowscarada here as it just gets knocked out. It was already a Dark type, but just making sure that, you didn't change to a more beneficial type against that one. Of course, this does now mean this is the last Pokemon on the field, and it's going to be a Paldean Taurus locked into close combat. So all you really need to do is land an attack. The big change here is the Arcanine lowering the attack, and that Grass-type Terra. Guess what, Scott? That is not the type you want to be.
Arcanine's looking pretty smug there, and I think it's about to send us to a Game 3.
Yeah, that is come back to cause so many problems. I mean, it didn't really matter in that turn, right? Like, it wasn't able to cause that problems. He does get to show the Steel type costs you, and you get to knock it out with the close combat. But at the end of this turn, I think it's going to be looking a whole lot different. Arcanine with the Flare Blitz, two defense drops on the Paldean Taurus because of those close combats. This top 16 match is going the distance.
Yeah, just an awesome game by Chuppa there. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not an easy matchup. We don't see either half of the usual, Dondozo Tatsugiri combination that this team is built around. I thought he just played that brilliantly, right? Where, we did see him have to deal with being in Trick Room with, I mean, two Pokemon that are just terrible in Trick Room. And then, Golden Go is just so important in that matchup. Again, he's using a version of this Pokemon that's a little bit different from most of what we see in the field, where we've seen typically the more defensive, nasty plot set, or like kind of just like the all-in Choice Scarf or Choice Specs. He's like somewhere in the middle, right, where he's got the nasty plot and crucially Protect to help, not be such an easy target, but also the Steel type Terra and the Life Orb to dish out that damage. I think it's going to be really difficult to do that again. He played that game basically perfectly, but yeah, I mean, I'm pretty impressed. Where I think it would have been like one bad move, and it would have been very easy to just kind of like lose two Pokemon at any point. And then I think like the sequencing was really important for him that game. You don't want to have to send Arcanine out too early and activate Defiant on King Gambit, where everything was just right.
Well, I'm going to be honest, this is a very quick lock-in for Angel Miranda. Can see he's already knowing exactly how he wants to play this game, making those adaptations. Chuppa did make some changes. I mean, the Dondozo stayed at home, and that was probably where it needed to be. Making room for that Arcanine did seal up the game very comfortably for him. I think there's pretty much any way around it at that point would have been fine, but definitely helped out. I think that was a much better team selection from Chuppa, and you said it to me before we got into the game. You said, I think you leave the combination entirely at home, and I think that game just proves how correct that was.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a very tricky game three for Chuppa here, where I still feel like Angel has like a huge team advantage here, right? Where he's got to be pretty sneaky to get through this one, and I think it's not like he's going to just pick the same Pokemon, the same moves, and Angel's going to let him win the same way. So yeah, now what window can Chuppa find to kind of sneak another one by him? You'd assume it has to be a very Golden Go focused strategy again, but it's not like he has something like Rage Powder or Follow Me to like simplify that, where he needed a lot of positioning that first game, and will Angel choose to set up Trick Room again, which ended up kind of more helping Chuppa than him.
I don't think the Trick Room was as valuable as I would have liked to see it, right? I mean, just Golden Go as a Pokemon, good as gold, just saying no. So the Amoonguss, which is like a big swing factor in the Trick Room, it's like, you've got those turns to put everything to sleep. The fact you can't do that just feels really wasteful in the Trick Room. You can't do it, you can't put it to sleep, you can't damage it. What are you doing, Amoonguss? Like, you're not capitalizing on the Trick Room as I like, and we already see an adaptation in the lead. Taurus and King Gambit, the lead once again for Angel's side of the field, going up against the Meowscarada and Pawmot of Chuppa. So both trainers kind of falling back on the successful situations that they put themselves in the previous two games.
Yeah, it's a pretty tough spot for this Meowscarada, where we've seen Taurus's Choice Scarf, right? Where normally this would be a somewhat Meowscarada favored situation. You'd still have to worry about a terrestrialization from Tauros. Now he's just being threatened with so much damage, right, that you basically have to fake out Tauros if you don't want to just cough Meowscarada up for nothing. So Angel putting up the pressure early.
Oh, well, there's not going to be a fake out as the Pormont does return to the field. So let's see how this one is going to work out. The Golden Go coming in place of the Pormont. King Gambit leaving the field. So making sure that there's a little bit of wiggle room here. And the Mimikyu taking to it right again. The targeting here of the Paldean Taurus is going to be absolutely huge. Seeing where it goes. And the close combat just lands into the Meowscarada. That is not got the Focus Sash. We know where the Focus Sash is. Everyone knows where the Focus Sash is. It's on the team sheet. And Chuppa has coughed up a Pokemon turn 1. That is not where you need to be in this one.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it's you know, we saw how much maneuvering he had to do in that first game, and you know, even if the second game rather, and kind of even if things were to play out similarly, it's a lot to lose. The plus side is he does get to bring in Arcanine more easily this time. Doesn't have to worry about activating a Defiant ability on that King Gambit against two Pokemon who are negatively affected by Intimidate. But yeah, I mean, he lost a whole Pokemon for that, right? And like, it seemed like Meowscarada was going to have a pretty good matchup against this team. The reality has kind of been that it can't swing all that safely and is super frail. So like, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world specifically for it to be knocked out, but just not having that fourth Pokemon to switch around with and maybe use as a sacrifice later is a big loss.
It's certainly going to cause some problems there. The Paldean Taurus leaving the field, doesn't want to get caught after those close combat defense drops. Would be way too easy though. Chuppa has decided it's time to set up the Golden Go again. This is something that was integral in the last game as Mimikyu reveals one of my favorite moves. It's going to be Curse. So it does cut its health in half, and then it's going to be taking chunks of health off the Arcanine between turns until it switches out, right? The Disguise makes sure that that Flare Blitz isn't that impactful. And look, it's just going to take away a clean quarter. Of course, this is here for the Dondozo matchup. This is why it's been something that Chuppa is unable to bring. And Mimikyu revealing that secret in Game 3, it's going to force a switch, and we know what the switch is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting move in this situation, too. Or, you know, maybe it's mostly for Dondozo, but anytime you're up with a Pokemon advantage like this, right, it puts on a ton of pressure, particularly in this situation, right? Well, you switch out the Arcanine. Well, how do you get it back in without activating the Defiant ability, right? It's a weird synergy where, you know, he can't really afford to just give up Arcanine here, which I think is almost giving up the game, but perhaps we'll leave it out here for another turn.
It's going to be tough if you leave it that low as well. It's certainly going to cause problems. It's going to be the third and final time in this match where it's going to be the Steel-type Terra on the Golden Go. So accepting that at some point he might get hit by the close combat, but in this turn, it's super important. In this turn, it saves him from the Shadow Sneak and the Sucker Punch, so he's able to take those hits without being Ghost type. Of course, that Nasty Plot did boost up the stats over on that side of the field. Mimikyu easily knocked out here. The King Gambit taking it pretty well, I'd say. Of course, the King Gambit is going to still have to deal with something from this Arcanine, which could be a lot more punishing. So let's see how much. And Golden Go is, of course, taking a little bit of damage as well. And the Arcanine's sticking with it, going with another one of those Flare Blitz, easily getting the knockout on the King Gambit. So would potentially be able to switch out without giving away that Defiant ability. The recoil is going to start adding up when you've got that Curse ticking between turns as well.
That's a ton of damage, but he gets them both. I mean, that's a pretty big turn, you know. You see with the Pokemon here, too, I mean, we'll see Amoonguss and Tauros coming in. Tauros is going to immediately have to lock into a move, so, you know, Chuppa's going to get that information, and, you know, now there is the option of switching, right, where, you know, you can intimidate that Tauros if you can't knock it out immediately, the option of protecting the Golden Go here. You know, maybe this isn't such a bad spot where, I mean, that was a big turn. I think, you know, if Chuppa calls that wrong and, you know, maybe, like, King Gambit switches out or something, like, it's kind of just over, right, where, again, you know, there's just no margin for error on Chuppa's side, but, you know, it's a pretty interesting spot now. It's still not great, but he's got a real shot at this, and you know, potentially, you know, has an option of like making a switch if he can get away with it, threatening a fake out at some point later in the game. There are options on Chuppa's side now.
The big decision here for Angel was what was he going to lock that Paldean Taurus into, and I think we obviously get a little preview of it. I think Raging Bull is absolutely the way to go here. You can't just be throwing your defenses away like that every single turn, so being able to make sure that he catches some of that. I mean, you know, it's what happens as well, you know, when we get to kind of these switches. This Pormont is going to be coming in place of the Golden Go. Doesn't want to get caught by something like maybe trying to fish out that close combat, right? And say, you know what, it's going to cause some problems. But Pormont, caught by the Raging Bull, is going to be able to take that hit, obviously, just because of how strong it is. Amoonguss will take that Flare Blitz. Of course, the Arcanine will be damaged by the recoil. The Amoonguss will then go ahead and heal up. So looking pretty good at the end of this turn. Certainly going to able to cause some problems. And Amoonguss spores the Arcanine. That's really big for closing out this game. I mean, it's just going to get cursed.
Yeah, I think it was a nice play by Chuppa. So, I mean, it looks a little weird that he doesn't switch the Arcanine there. Like, why would you not just switch out of the curse? But it's too telegraphed, right? If he had done that, then we end up with the sleeping Palmon here, and it's basically useless with how frail it is, right? It's certainly going to be knocked out before it gets the chance to move. You're having to drop not a full nasty plot, but just a slight nasty scheme. It's still, it's a bummer, but there's a value there. So now there's options on Chuppa's side of the field. You can just go for the fake out and attack. There's also the option, if you don't think that Palmot's being targeted, you can try to go for a cheeky revival blessing. We haven't seen it yet, but there's a lot. This is an extremely high volatility turn.
Yeah, this I don't know if you're feeling that cheeky. I'd say Revival Blessing is audacious if you can get it off here. And of course, you're still in a pretty tough situation to try and work through this one. Of course, the Golden Go doesn't have that nasty plot set up. The special attack is back to neutral. So it'll be able to fire off a neutral Make It Rain, and that would cause problems. If it goes for the nasty plot, at some point there are going to be problems caused. That said, there is going to be the Terastallization for the Amoonguss, something I don't think many people were expecting to see over the course of this tournament, becoming the Dark type.
Yeah, so I mean, sort of weird. I mean, I think usually for helping with Prankster, in this case, could allow it to Rage Powder away a Shadow Ball and take very little damage.
Yeah, that is going to be taking that away, being able to see what gets thrown out. The Tauros, of course, flinching from the fake out. The Rage Powder is not really going to matter here, as Make It Rain will be connecting on both of these Pokemon. And the Amoonguss able to tank that one up. Golden Go's special attack dropping and losing some of its health. This is a really, as you said, it was a volatile turn, a dicey situation, and a Rage Powder that did absolutely nothing for Angel.
Yeah, I mean, this is really strange now because, I mean, Tauros is going to knock out one of these two Pokemon. Like, it's going to move first, and now then we can survive attack. But what do you do? Well, if you let it make it rain, the game's over. So you kind of have to knock out Golden Go now, which exposes Palmon, who could now, if it wanted to, get off that Revival Blessing. But if you're bold on Angel's side, you can just attack with both Pokemon. And then, I mean, Palmon only a single target attacks, so it can't knock them both out. In that scenario, if he clicks anything but Revival Blessing, the game's over.
Yes, so this is a crazy turn. It's going to be the Rage Powder for the Amoonguss, so I think targeting down the Golden Go is absolutely essential here. The Tauros will connect the Raging Bull, obviously. That's going to be an easy knockout on the Golden Go. So the big focal point of this team has been knocked out. The Pokemon that saved him so much in game number 2. Palmon with the Revival Blessing, making those numbers not what Angel was expecting, coming into the following turn. So being able to bring back a partner is huge. What do you go for here, Scott?
Oh gosh, I mean, checking the team sheet here. I mean, what moves did, I mean, interesting. So we know Tauros is locked into a water type attack here, so it's a little weird to bring Arcanine, but I think Arcanine's the answer, right? You do get the Intimidate out here, so it'll reduce its damage, and you kind of seem to spot it, right? Where, again, it can't knock out both of these Pokemon. Arcanine, even though it's not as quick as Tauros, is threatening extreme speed, which kind of forces Amoonguss into another Rage Powder if you don't just want to immediately lose the Tauros. It's still an awkward position where, I don't think Chuppa had the Pokemon that was like the full GG by reviving it, but this definitely makes this game really interesting.
Let's see how this one comes out. It is one of the closest games I think we've seen all weekend, to be quite honest with you, Scott. This Tauros locked into the Raging Bull, trying to get these knockouts as quickly as it can. As Arcanine's extreme speed deals with the Tauros, that is come back. It got cursed, it got knocked out by the curse, then it got revived. It's definitely getting a little bit spooky here as close combat landing into the Dark type Amoonguss. A super effective hit for 7 health. A really tough matchup, but 2 phenomenal games from Chuppa Cross played out here on stream. He'll be moving into the top 8.
Yeah, really fantastic set there. And I mean, what a move, right? Where we haven't seen Palmon all weekend, and the Revival Blessing is the only way out, right? Like, it doesn't matter what else that Pokemon could have. It's, I think people were really scared and excited when they saw this move being introduced to the game. And Chuppa shows it up perfectly there, where that was such a difficult team matchup where, again, it just seemed like if he made one, big error at any point, the game is just over. He gets through game 2 and 3 just playing really smoothly. I'm impressed. I think it would have been so easy to collapse there.
Well, the team matchup, I'd agree with you. It didn't look great. I think Chuppa was 100% locked into that 4 Pokemon. But when you get 4.5 versus 4, you're just at a natural advantage, just how maths works. So being able to, of course, bring back that Arcanine, knowing about the moves that it has access to, the extreme speed to deal with that Taurus, which had already been kind of whittled down over a couple of turns, was absolutely huge. And that for me shows that there's still more to explore in this metagame. I mean, I wasn't really expecting to see Revival Blessing. Yes, it only brings him back at half, but sometimes that's enough to push you over the edge in that game. Like, there's so many times in games where I've been like, I wish I had a little bit more time with that Pokemon. Well, we finally got a way to do that, and I don't really see how Angel was able to get out of that and navigate around that, especially with the Rage Powders coming through at the end there.
Yeah, he kind of got forced in a situation where he had to do exactly what he did, right? Where Golden Ghost putting out so much pressure that he almost had no choice but to do what he did. I guess there's that one Rage Powder if it didn't matter, where if he had done something else, maybe the game plays out differently. But by that point, just too late, right? And then once we get in that situation where the Revival Blessing comes out, there's nothing that Angel can do really, right? Where he has to allow that to happen, and then